Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, Bill.
We're here this morning. It's after Labor Day, and today we're talking about something profound.
Well, it's certainly dense.
It's dense. Specifically, for those of you listening, we're talking about the Securities and Exchange Commission's. I have to say that specifically because in this part of the country they think SEC is the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, they're confused.
Exactly. It's the Securities and Exchange Commission, Reg AB. Now, Reg AB's been out a long time for asset-backed, but AB2.
This is the big change in response to all the problems we had with the crash. And they have done some fairly extensive work to modify all the regulations.
Big is the operative
changes.
word. This is the regulation they adopted, printed 4 sheets to a page. It is 683 pages.
You have it memorized yet?
I don't have it memorized. I've got what's on each page, a draft memorized. That will be coming off. It'll be published in the Federal Register. I didn't check last week. It's normally published 8 days to 10 days, 2 weeks after it's adopted. It was adopted the Thursday before Labor Day as a final rule. And it'll be effective 60 days after publication in the Federal Register. When I say it's effective, it'll take effect. It won't go into effect either, depending on the situation, 1 year or 2 years after adoption.
Yeah, different parts go into effect different
Correct.
times. And but yeah, it's got some major changes. Some that are pretty outstanding. I mean, the fact that they're no longer requiring the securities to be rated by the credit rating agencies.
Well, let's talk about scope and what it covers and that sort of thing. There's a lot of discussion about we should have RMBS, residential mortgage-backed securities, and CMBS,
Right.
commercial mortgage-backed securities, as well as other things.
Well, it includes autos. It includes debt obligations.
Everything that's private label, and basically when I say private label, I'm talking about non-GSE stuff.
Right. But basically, it includes everything that is a registered public offering. And you can still have a private securitization that's not covered by this. And so it's not quite as broad as Dodd-Frank, but they're looking into that, and maybe they'll include those later on.
It's very broad. For our listeners out there, most of them are in the mortgage business. You're awaiting the return of the private label residential mortgage-backed security market, and this is going to go a long way to bringing it back.
What they decided to do, instead of having the credit agencies rate these, is that they are opting for a higher level of disclosure.
Yeah, and basically, let's talk about their commentary. The SEC's commentary is that basically it did not give sufficient disclosure. If you had a credit-worthy rating, it did not give sufficient disclosure to the investor. And basically, the investors could not rely on the credit ratings.
Right now, they're going to require that a fairly extensive amount of data be provided with each of these issuance. Plus, there's going to be a waiting time where potential purchasers can review these before they're actually put out for sale.
So it used to be you could go out and solicit offers and that sort of thing, and then you had some curative period where you could cure basically your disclosures and that sort of thing and sort of true up at the end.
Yeah, right.
No more.
No, this is all done up front now. And they've got basically the disclosures are in 3 categories. The credit quality, the collateral backing the security, and the cash flow information.
And so let's step back for a second and talk about the asset level disclosures, and then let's talk about them in the context of those 3 areas. So if we step back and we look at the asset level disclosures, some of our listeners out there are very familiar with MISMO.
Right.
It's an XML, an extensible. It's just a data format. It's a form of a data structure, extensible markup language. And let's talk about that. And what did the SEC say about that?
Well, basically, they said that MISMO is not comprehensive enough for the data that they wanted to be able to disclose. So they're using their own standard for the data, the XML. At one point, they had talked about having the issuers create websites that would have this information on them where you would have to have a login ID and password, but they decided to provide all of that data through EDGAR.
Right.
And so
Which is the
there'll be
SEC's disclosure
right.
system.
And so it's a fairly extensive amount of data that they're asking the people to disclose. There's 74 common elements that they have to provide. And then if it's an RBS, I'll get these numbers right, there are 270 data fields that for RBS, 108 for commercial, 116 for auto, and 60 for debt security.
And that makes sense because RMBS, the residential mortgage-backed securities, have historically not been underwritten at an asset level. They've been underwritten at a pool level. Whereas commercial mortgage-backed securities are underwritten at a property-specific level typically.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this works because a lot of, once the assets are out there, or the securities are out there, you've got a cash flow coming from those, but you really don't know much about what's underlying those.
And the performance of what's underlying.
Right. And in terms of pricing these securities after they're initially issued, one of the issues has been, can I find out what's underlying, what properties are underlying these securities?
And you were not able to do that historically. In fact, that's part of the meltdown that we had in 2008, 2009, is there was a pool of loans, a bond issued that was backed by this pool of loans, and it was serviced by the cash flows off this pool of loans. Those cash flows were sliced and diced or tranched.
Right.
And if an investor wanted to buy a tranche, what price should they pay? To analyze that price, they needed to be able to go back and analyze the underlying security, and they weren't able to do that.
No. And the reason is that they're worried about privacy, okay? And once you know the property, then you know the owner of the property, then you know the owner of the mortgage, and they can get back, and so now you know the credit information on that particular borrower. And so they blocked that, but what a lot of people were doing was to try and reverse engineer that and actually identify the property underlying that based upon the loan characteristics. They provided the zip code in the old days, and based upon that zip code, you could sometimes identify from the public record which property that was.
They've gotten away from that.
Right. Now they're saying, no, that's too much loss of privacy. And so now they're just going to the first 2 digits of the zip code.
Which is basically the state, as I recall. The first digit's the region, and the second digit's the state.
It's not quite, it's not a one-to-one thing of the state. If
close.
you look at the 6-digit or 5-digit zip code, there are about 42,000 zip codes in the U.S. If you take that down to 3, the first 3, it drops down to about 900. And if you take it down to 1, there are 9 regions.
Yeah.
2
nine
is,
postal regions.
Right. 2, the 2 digits is about 100 regions in the country.
So it could be like a half a state.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it makes it very difficult to match that property.
Right.
Now that's good and bad. For privacy concerns, that's good. But for the buyer of a security, how do they know what that property is worth? What's going on with those properties?
And as we all know, that determines a lot of performance, both
Exactly,
prepayment
yes.
and foreclosure.
Right.
And so there's going to be increased disclosure. As a practical matter, let's talk about what lenders are going to have to do. Today, a lender, when they originate a loan, captures certain information in their LOS. However, some of the things that are reported are going to be required to be reported, we believe, although I don't think it's been completely defined in terms of the specification. I don't think those are captured in the LOS.
They're not, and there's going to have to be some conversion too, because one of the things they're talking about providing as one of the data elements is what level of review was done on that loan, and was it sent back for so many changes, or
Did it pass the first level?
exactly. Did it go through the first time, or did it have to be adjusted back and forth? That's good. There's going to be a code for that, and I don't think anybody's got that right now.
That's right. And so there are going to be significant changes when there's a correspondent loan, and a lot of lenders engage in correspondent lending.
Right.
All that stuff is images and paper, and that's going to be a challenge as well. It's going to require a lot of additional data extraction.
Well, it's a brave new world.
It's a brave new world. It's a brave new world. This will be published in the Federal Register soon. We're out of time. This is FNC's Morning View. We hope you all have a fantastic week and a wonderful conclusion. We're nearing the end of summer. The autumnal equinox is the third week in September. And so
Whoa.
we're coming up on fall soon.
So we'll have to have a big celebration.
Big celebration. You all have a fantastic week. Bye-bye.
Bye.